Well, I guess I'm back. After several scrapped videos, video ideas had and then lost, and scripts put to the wayside, I have returned to talk about something topical to fill the void while I work on something more extensive. And since it's Halloween, I thought, why not do something festive for this holiday season and review a new hit horror movie. Rattling off my first impressions of it, and, just seeing what I have to say. So let's just look at what's all out right now. Okay, so we got Saw 10, which just looks like another Saw movie. The Exorcist reboot sequel thing, and I thought the Saw franchise was stale. Yeah, that one. Ugh. Not touching that. Killers of the Flower Moon. Oh, the new Scorsese film. That's over 3 hours long. Marty, I want to feel scared, not miserable. And as much as I love you, Marty, this is spooky season, and I'm not quite ready for the seasonal depression to kick my ass again. And then there's this. Oh, fuck this. And I thought this was scrapped and buried, like every other forced video game adaptation that was known to existence. I don't really want to do this, but the title of the video is what it is already. So I guess I've already settled on it, so I can't complain now. But what's the other movie in the title? Skinamarink. I mean, it's a newer movie that came out in the last year or two, so why am I tying it together with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie? It's not like it has anything in common with it. It's not like they both came from online cultural zeitgeists who used nostalgia to distort them into nightmares, and both became incredibly popular in the last few, from the rabid discussion around it, and leading to an endless analysis about small, insignificant frames of data. It certainly wasn't that. I just wanted to shit on one and praise the other. Totally. But in all seriousness, I think that there could be something into looking at these two movies together and how they handle the transition from one type of media to the next. Let's start with the obvious one, or at least the one that probably needs a lot less explanation to understand why it got on film, and that is, of course, Five Nights at Freddy, because why not? In its rise from a small, no-budget game made by a single man into a multi-million-dollar multimedia franchise. This meteoric rise in fame was brought on by all the hype that it received online from YouTubers analyzing it and others playing it. Its simplistic gameplay and creepy Chuck E. Cheese aesthetic made it fit in with a lot of the online culture going around horror media back in 2014, things like creepypasta, jump scare videos being heavily circulated around that time. As it went on, though, the game's fandom grew exponentially more with the release of each new installment, and an increasing number of people reading into the new entry's subtext to find new bits of information that would hopefully reveal something about the backstory of these games. And before we go any further into this video, I should probably state my stance on all of this, FNAF lore, because I don't fucking care, okay? Outside of the first few game theory videos that came out when I was in middle school, I completely am disinterested in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Throughout the height of its popularity, I was just way too old for this type of shit, and didn't get its appeal at all, because it appealed to those who were just a few years younger than me. I just couldn't get it. And now those people are watching scary movies to go along with their scary YouTube videos and scary games. And yeah, that's where we arrived at the Five Nights at Freddy's. Now all that's left to begin talking about the movies themselves is Skinamarink, and how some guy stumbled into making his first feature film, and how it turned a more relevant online horror trend into a feature-length film without the help of a big brand name like FNAF did. Skinamarink uses the style of analog horror, which uses lo-fi nostalgic visuals and distorts them to create cryptic and unnerving images, and I'm probably completely underselling this explanation. Go watch some other videos about it. I'm keeping it pretty brief. And the director of Skinamarink also made videos in the similar style, and eventually had his short Heck as an official selection of the Video Scream Film Festival back in 2020, which served as a proof of concept and generated enough interest to help generate the money for Skinamarink and all of its budget. So, through its theatrical release of Skinamarink, it became a huge hit online, through social media, TikTok, and whatnot, and the rest is history. So, with all that background, I think we're kind of ready to talk about the movie, and how both of these things kind of work inside the films. Skinamarink maintains the style of analog horror for the entirety of its runtime, and manages to make this strange, unreal nightmare that stays true to the style and often delivers on the nightmarish feel that it generates. It follows two kids who get trapped alone in a house with some other presence lurking around the corner. FNAF, on the other hand, takes whatever made it the original game special and streamlines it into a film that is digestible and easy to watch. They sometimes play up the nostalgia for that Chuck E. Cheese stuff a little bit, but opts to focus on more of the manufactured, familiar lore and generic storytelling elements that come from it being a film. Although I guess you could say it follows the first game or whatever, I don't care. It follows the new security guard at Freddy's and as he does his Five Nights, and deals with his own issues in his own life and how they play into this new strange job and all of the weird things around it. But really, does the plot go anywhere? Not really. Not to say Skinamarink is entirely immune to this as well. Instead of the plot going nowhere interesting, it just kind of goes nowhere. Like, seriously, not a lot happens in the film, and it just feels frustrating at times to watch. Especially at the end, where the ending doesn't really feel like an ending, and it just kind of keeps going. It kind of feels like he had a premise in mind, but not much else to it. And I guess the main focus of the film was achieved. The director did achieve the nightmarish film that captures kind of being lost and stuck in your own home, but he did not focus on the story whatsoever. But goddamn, fuck, that aesthetic passes in flying colors. Everything from the camera work and the hushed environment makes for a setting that feels entirely familiar and comfortable, like I was saying earlier, but somehow disturbed and unnerving. The specific camera and how it was placed is what causes that type of reaction, at least in me, just from how much of it is left in our imagination. Most of the shots, when following a character, usually capture their feet or the ceiling or some inanimate object close by instead of actual movement. That rare sighting of movement kind of creates that gravity to it and creates the reliance on the subtle movements, the small things that happen. And it also ties in with what the characters are talking about. But that brings me to my two core main complaints outside of the plot. It just feels like the voice acting at times for the kids is pretty mediocre and kind of bad. And also it's like placement into the mix at times, into the sound mix, just feels jarring. Maybe that part was intentional, but I don't know. Their delivery kind of felt forced. And I think I'm just gonna let it slide, because it's not a big deal. I think they did fine. They're pretty young. FNAF, on the other hand, most of what happens and how it handles what happens is pretty straightforward and pretty middling as well. Same thing with the acting. Like, nothing special goes on. I don't know what I expected, but the acting was boring and the directing. Josh Hutcherson, he's fine, and so is the rest of the main cast. Nothing's, like, laughably bad. I do appreciate Matthew Lillard showing up again in these types of movies, kind of doing his thing that he was doing in Scream. I do like that. I guess I can also say that the dream sequences are also something of note, but I think one of the biggest things that I like about this movie is the animatronics and their look. They obviously weren't going for something as, like, dingy and harsh as the original game, and they kind of maintained the level of polish that, you know, the characters at Five Nights at Freddy's might have at that point. And my hat goes off to the Jim Henson Company for creating these animatronics and making them look really good, and because of how often they're in the film, I think it's pretty good to have something that's that well done. But the thing is, I don't know what's scary about them. It's not really much of a movie and not really much happens in the movie. I mean, like, there's kind of a plot, but it goes nowhere. It's like he wants to find his brother, like find who took his brother, but yeah. And then there's a B plot of his aunt trying to kid sister to get the money, and it goes a whole lot of nowhere real fast. Like that entire plot gets thrown out the window halfway through the movie. It was entirely forgettable and just downright uninteresting and unimpressive. And just for some reason, my mind went to this when watching it. It just reminded me of when the Lifetime channel decided to make a movie about the Grumpy Cat, and they just kind of haphazardly made a movie with that character just being there. And that's kind of what this feels like. Characters are there. They're both fine. You could fall asleep to this movie. It's fine. They're that kind of watch, but I don't think there's anything interesting here. I think it commits the worst crime any movie can, and that's being boring. And it's not like an interesting kind of boring where you can get engaged continually by, like, soaking yourself in the atmosphere like Skinamarink. And it, a movie like that having a pace that's slow, that's so slow that it makes Bellatar cry tears of joy. It's the type of boring that makes me feel like I'm wasting my time watching it. And I swear to God, the only other redeeming quality besides the puppets is fucking Matt Pat's cameo. And, that's the only thing that kind of saved the movie. So, would I recommend either of these films? Just in general, and maybe even specifically for Halloween? And which one would I rather watch? Well, I think it's pretty obvious from what I said that I would not recommend Five Nights at Freddy's, and I would give a light recommendation to Skinamarink. But as far as it goes to whether you should watch this movie on Halloween, with some friends or at a party or something, which one is a better party favor? I guess Five Nights at Freddy's. But to be completely honest, I don't even think that Five Nights at Freddy's is the best Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I guess to recommend a better FNAF movie than the FNAF movie, you might want to watch Willy's Wonderland. It's an incredibly stupid and bad movie that plays on the same kind of nostalgia, but it turns the horror into a more straightforward action movie where the main character just fights the animatronics and says nothing. But at least it's entertaining, in a bad way. Also, it has Nick Cage, so what's not to love? Happy Halloween, everyone.